Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads, and if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show, and if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Welcome to Rewind-A-Dynamite. I am John Pollock alongside Wai Ting, and we have a very busy show for you tonight. We are going to be going through Fyter Fest, heading into All In this weekend, and we will be getting to your feedback, your questions, and your super chats if you want to get them in a little later on. But off of the top, we are going to be discussing the passing of a legendary figure in professional wrestling, Terry Funk, who has passed away at the age of 79. This was one of those stories, Wai, that I think everyone, knew that the day would be coming for Terry Funk. But nonetheless, I don't think that prepares you for someone of this just enormous influence, of someone that, had a career that goes back to like in the ring in the mid 60s. But you could go like, this guy was born into the industry through his father, Dory Funk Sr., and somebody that ties in everything from Eddie Graham to ICP and XPW and all things in between. This was somebody that, was wrestling not all that many years ago when he was finally finishing up like his in-ring years. And, his wife passed away a number of years ago, and that was very, very hard on him. But this is, it's a cliche of how the term legend is often thrown around, but that word is reserved for people of the stature of a Terry Funk.
Certainly, yeah. Unfortunately, news that really wasn't surprising at this stage, just given recent health reports. Nonetheless, it anytime you have to try to like put into words, either in a 20-minute discussion or on like in an article about, the entirety of a man's career, it's really difficult, but it's especially difficult when you're talking about somebody like a Terry Funk. So I'm sure our guest today will try his best.
Yeah, we wanted to have W.H. Park join us here off the top to talk just a little bit about the career of Terry Funk. And there's so many different ways of which we can go, W.H., in terms of Terry Funk and his influence as, just so many different areas of the industry, and he did them all. But I kind of want to just start with when Terry Funk first came onto your radar. Can you go back to when you first, I'm going to guess it was probably sometime in the 80s in WCW maybe, but let me know when Terry Funk kind of came into your orbit.
Oh, in the WWF, when he was feuding with the Junkyard Dog.
Okay.
And he did the famous angle with the ring attendant who put on his cowboy hat. And then he proceeded to beat the living shit out of the guy. And then from that moment on, I was like, who is this guy? This guy's like, holy, he is like one mean dude. And like, from there, he's like, doing the stuff with the Junkyard Dog. He's being managed by Jimmy Hart. He teams up with Dory Funk Jr., his brother, later on, Hoss Funk, and then they bring in Jimmy Jack, and then then he kind of disappears off my television radar after he leaves the WWF. But I'm following him through the aftermaths. He's doing, I think he's mainly Memphis, and then he's wrestling in Japan. He's wrestling in, like Puerto Rico. And then he finally comes back to do the famous angle with Ric Flair in the dying days of NWA before it becomes WCW. And then it's like, okay, he's back. And then it's just, he's an ever, he's always there in wrestling, I feel. And then when I'm getting into Japanese wrestling, particularly New Japan and All Japan, is like, oh, okay, he is so important to All Japan especially. And then later on you discover, okay, he's also so important to the popularity of FMW, and really a pioneer of of deathmatch wrestling from the days of FMW and then IWA in Japan to ECW.
Yeah, it's like just going through his career in the last couple of hours, and you just look at all of these places that he was from, going to Florida during the golden period of that territory. When you talk about Japan as, one of the most influential Americans to go over there, like him and his brother being like the like they were right there with Baba as they're launching All Japan, and then Terry Funk and Dory, they become the foreign bookers for All Japan, and that is their home company. And 1983, it's the big retirement match, and that was thought to be that's the end. That's the send off of Terry Funk. It's the famous moment in Beyond the Mat with Forever, and he comes back in 1984. But that is how far back we're going. We're going. This guy was ready to call it a career before I was born.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, one of the things that's synonymous with Terry Funk's is retirement ceremonies and retirement matches that he never seems to keep. But if you talk about just Japan, like, there is no All Japan without Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. Because their popularity aside, they were the foreign bookers. They booked all the foreign talent through their Amarillo promotion to come work for Giant Baba. Giant Baba trusted the Funk family, particularly like Terry and Dory. They became two of the most popular foreign wrestlers ever to wrestle in Japan. Like, I in my Stan Hansen biography would say that Stan Hansen is the most well-known and probably the most popular foreign wrestler to ever wrestle in Japan. But coming very close to him is Terry Funk. Like, people know who Terry Funk is. They know who, the signature of like a cowboy wrestler is Terry Funk. But they also he's synonymous with deathmatch wrestling via his work in IWA and FMW.
Yeah, I mean, he is one of the many that came out of West Texas State, of just all of the wrestlers that kind of migrated from there. And a large part of that was because in that part of the territory, of that part of the state, I mean, it was very much cultivated by first like Doc Sarpolis, but then when Dory Funk Sr. Got a piece of that territory, and it became like the Funk's training ground. And you mentioned the relationship with Baba. I mean, he sent Jumbo Tsuruta over there to train with the Funks, Junichiro Tenaru to go over there. Like, that really does kind of underline that trust that they had with the Funks. And the Funks are a mainstay of All Japan all the way up until the 90s. And it's like all these different chapters. And then you look at the 90s and you think, okay, this is where a guy who was NWA champion in 1975 is probably on, the final lap of his career. And the 90s, you could argue he has some of his biggest impact when it comes to what he did with FMW. I mean, trying to get helping Smoky Mountain Wrestling get off the ground. Of course, there's the ECW influence throughout the 90s where he was so key to that first pay-per-view. And then here was a guy that was in the WWF during the first big national boom period, headlining with Hogan on NBC. And then he's back in the Attitude Era as Chainsaw Charlie. And then he finds himself as, just by proxy, attached to that famous Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker and Mick Foley, and he's there killing time. And then he's going back to Japan, and then he's getting involved in other upstarts. Like, he was just involved in so many different eras and generations and adjusting himself. And I don't think there will ever be another person that is going to have a comparable type of career to Terry Funk. I think it's impossible in the way that the industry is structured now, WH, that you could ever come close to replicating this type of legacy.
I don't think anyone can have the career of a Terry Funk. I mean, he was so unique. He just worked everywhere. That was the thing. Like, a lot of people, they'll pick a promotion, they work for that promotion. He picked, at least 5 different promotions between, 1972 to like 1983, on top of like being loyal to Giant Baba. And then, I mean, you mentioned like Jumbo Tsuruta being sent to the Funks to be trained by them, and Junichiro Tenaru, but also like they discovered and they trained Stan Hansen. And I can't even imagine what wrestling in Japan would be like without Stan Hansen. And like, if you take a poll of like who are the most famous foreign wrestlers to ever work in Japanese wrestling, of course Stan Hansen's going to be up there, Bruiser Brody, Abdul the Butcher, but like Terry and Dory Funk are going to be in that conversation. I would say, Terry's like hovering between, 2 and 3. Like, it's amazing. And the thing was with Terry Funk in Japan is they loved him because he loved Japan so much. It came through in his wrestling, his entrances from the dressing room to the ring. And just, if you watch any any of his matches in All Japan, like the entrance and the love that the fans have for him was just unbelievable. I think it's unparalleled, to be quite honest, and I don't think it's been matched since.
And in terms of Stan Hansen, I know you guys, you just went over this on your Long and Winding Royal Road show, but I mean, Terry and Dory, they're the foreign bookers when Stan Hansen makes the big jump from New Japan to All Japan. It was this very famous scene at the end of the Real World Tag League final. That was in 1981.
That jump starts like the war between All Japan and New Japan had started maybe a bit earlier with the jumping of Abdullah Butcher to New Japan. And so, I was just watching an interview Stan Hansen has talking about like, how did that happen? How did you make the jump from New Japan to All Japan? Because he was being pushed there. And he said, oh, Terry Funk called me up and said, hey, Baba didn't like what happened with Abdullah. We want you to come over. And so he's the one who arranges the secret meeting between Baba and Stan Hansen. And Terry Funk is pretty much like an architect of a boom period in Japanese wrestling with this like kind of promotional war between All Japan and New Japan with talent jumping back and forth. And I would say All Japan pretty much came out on top of that deal because they got Stan Hansen and they also got Bruiser Brody and the deal. But the thing is like, okay, who are we going to pair them against? We're going to pair them against Terry Funk and Dory Funk, the two mainstay foreign guys who are wrestling for All Japan and are just synonymous with they are synonymous with All Japan as much as like Jumbo Tsuruta or Junichi Tenryu or.
Yeah, I mean, they had that legitimacy right off the bat of here are two former NWA champions that are, that was such a big part of sort of their kind of allure in Japan as well. Like once, Terry holds the title from 75 to 77 when he drops it to Harley Race, actually right here in Toronto is where he dropped the title. And as we mentioned, like he's pretty much a mainstay with All Japan until the early 90s, but there's so many stops in the way. It's like his promos are certainly going to outlive him because there are just so many incredible clips that are already circulating of some of his great promos. And I think some like you can pick all different eras of Terry Funk, but that period in like 1981 in Memphis, working with Jerry Lawler, this sets up the empty arena match, which is a very famous match that is referenced. I mean, that to me was like, if you just want a snapshot of Terry Funk, it's that empty arena match at the Mid-South Coliseum where it's like a closed set and it's just Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk showing up, and Terry Funk's performance in this is something for the ages.
Yeah, I think, like, I don't know anyone who's had such an influence in American wrestling and Japanese wrestling. You can talk about Stan Hansen, but he's primarily a Japanese wrestler. Like his influence is primarily in Japan, but Terry Funk spans the globe. He spans like into Memphis, into Florida, into the national promotions of the WWF, of WCW. And he has so many amazing feuds. I mean, we could talk about his feuds with Jerry Lawler, with Ric Flair, with the Junkyard Dog, and we just go on. And like all the matches he had with Jumbo and Tenryu and Brody and Hansen. It's quite a career. Like, and the fact that he was able to continue doing this well into his 60s was like, it's pretty impressive. And I've always had a great deal of admiration for the love Terry Funk had for professional wrestling, but also like how much he wanted to give back to a business that he felt gave so much to him.
Yeah. I mean, that was one thing that I was thinking about today, is that as late as those ECW tribute shows, I remember that it was that weekend when WWE's running the first One Night Stand, and then Shane Douglas is doing his Hardcore Homecoming shows, and he knew he could only work one of those shows that weekend. He couldn't do back-to-back nights, and he opted to do the Shane Douglas shows, just feeling like they are trying to preserve the real ECW and not just the version that WWE has like sucked up what was ECW. It was always sort of that paying it forward mentality that went into much later in his career. And then the following year, he had many, many stints when you look at it with the WWE from the 85, 86 period. He comes back. If this is a somewhat well-remembered story, when he was going to be one of Shawn Michaels' mystery nights at the Survivor Series in 93. And then the night before the Survivor Series, he left a note for Vince McMahon that he was going home because his horse was sick. And that was the last of Terry Funk for that run. Then he comes back in like 97 and is gone after some like expletive-laden promo on Shotgun Saturday Night. Then he's Chainsaw Charlie. He had some very bizarre runs in the WWF throughout his career. But how much of WCW were you watching? Like in 1989, are you pretty on board with WCW at that point? WH and
yeah, I mean, I'm there with like the the introduction of the Great Muta, like the alliance of like Terry Funk and Great Muta with Gary Hart, the JTEX Corporation, and like the feud with Ric Flair, but also like bringing in like people like Dick Slater is brought in, the Dragon Master is brought in, but the core of it is like Terry Funk and Great Muta versus Ric Flair and Sting. And I think that feud, the Flair Terry Funk feud, is like something that cements like WCW is like, okay, this is now a serious promotion. It's come from the ashes of Jim Crockett Promotions. And you also have like not only Flair and Funk at the top here, but just bubbling underneath are Sting and the Great Muta, who are like just bubbling, like, they're like, okay, if we can get these guys to this Funk Flair level, we're going to be able to give Vince a run for his money. They ended up doing that, but hey, I give Terry Funk a lot of credit for sticking around as long as he did. And then, I mean, we can also talk about, good Lord, like FMW. Like, I don't think FMW becomes as big as it did. I don't think Atsushi Onita, as charismatic and as influential as he was, I don't think he becomes as big as he is without, Terry Funk in there. And then like later on, he then applies his kind of stamp of approval to IWA and the King of the Deathmatch shows in Japan with Cactus Jack, aka Mick Foley.
Do you know, like, what is the transition that goes from All Japan to how does he get to FMW? And explain a bit about FMW, because here is a company that is drawing these, like, they're running stadium shows and they have no television at the time.
I'm not 100% sure, but I would imagine because the Atsushi Onita was, he started off in the All Japan dojo. He was in All Japan when Terry Funk was there, so they know each other that way. That, like, Terry Funk has retirement matches. I think pretty much Bob is like, no, you've retired. I don't want to put you back in the ring necessarily. But then, maybe Onita's like, hey, what if you want to come back to wrestling in Japan? Why don't you come do this stuff? And I can only imagine Terry Funk was like, hey, yeah, what, there's explosives and barbed wire. Sounds like, me wrestling in Florida and Memphis. Like, yeah, let's bring that stuff to Japan. I think to be able to be a kind of a pioneer of a different style of wrestling in Japan and be part of like something that's obviously working with Onita is something that was very appealing to Terry Funk. And then when, business is down with FMW for a variety of reasons, like, I don't know what the relationship with Onita and Funk was, or Funk with, whoever was in charge of FMW by the time he jumps to IWA Japan and does the deathmatch stuff over there. But like, I mean, I don't think this stuff gets as much press and as much, like coverage as it does in the West, if it's not because of Terry Funk's involvement in it.
And those like IWA shows, and in particular, like the King of the Deathmatch tournament, I mean, this was the tape to get. And a huge commercial that they got was when they ended up showing clips of this on Raw to really enhance Mick Foley and get him to that next level. And like, I just remember in the late 90s, a friend of mine going to an ECW show, and he bought one tape, and it was this King of the Deathmatch from 1995. And he invited me over, and we just put this tape on, and it was like we were watching something illegal. And getting to see this, and here is like Terry Funk, and this just becomes such a famous tournament, famous tape, and it's Mick Foley and Terry Funk that just put such a big spotlight on it. But again, like, that was most people's introduction into IWA in Japan.
And he, it didn't last as long as, as FMW would, but I think, Big Japan Pro Wrestling, owes a big debt of gratitude to the legacy of Terry Funk, because without him and Onita, I don't think it lasts as long as it has, like, to this day. Like, deathmatch wrestling, hardcore wrestling is such a popular thing in Japan because one of the most popular wrestlers to ever wrestle in Japan decided, I want to do this. Like, you can't see me in All Japan anymore, but hey, guess where you can watch me? I'm going to be in FMW, like, bleeding and getting torn up and being exploded with landmines with Onita. And there you go. And then that's, I think the rest is history. Like, and that then permeates over to, like, America with ECW especially. And Terry Funk's obviously involved with that as well.
He also had, getting outside of professional wrestling, like in movies like Roadhouse and Paradise Alley, but like for wrestling fans, and I would say even for non-fans, I'm curious, Wai, what you think, Beyond the Mat contributes to his, just the legacy of Terry Funk, where you got to see just a different side of him with his family. And at that point, they're building up to another retirement in '97 with Bret Hart, which is another retirement that doesn't stick. But that's, a very famous documentary for wrestling fans. And Terry Funk is a huge, huge part of that. And I think that was another aspect that people just get to see Terry Funk in a different light.
I would say probably a good deal. He's not somebody who I would say, despite, spending a lot of time in the WWE, I mean, was never a part of like the class of Hulkamania. And I don't know if he really enjoyed the same mainstream level of success as maybe a lot of his contemporaries. So for those who might have seen that personal side of him through the documentary, I thought it probably gave you a different perspective on, not just Terry Funk, but just maybe veteran wrestlers. And I would assume influenced a great deal of, The Wrestler. Is that the name of the movie? I forget at this point now. Darren Aronofsky.
The Wrestler. Yeah.
The Wrestler.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. It's been a while, everybody. So yeah, I would say Beyond the Mat probably, was certainly one of my first introductions. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, when you look back, and you're right, like he had his all different runs in the WWF, and he was someone that I would still say, like, if you're looking at the legacy of Terry Funk, it's like the WWF is like way down the list in terms of, and this is someone like he headlined a Saturday Night's Main Event with Hogan. Like, I would say like that 85, 86 run that you were exposed to, WH, would probably be his most sustained run, but this is not a guy that was just, it was off of the WWF exposure that, that was down the list for him. He crafted such a legacy, and it was all over the world and in really impactful ways too. When you look at, just for modern fans, I think they will associate him with ECW in many ways.
Oh, I think so. I think, like his, kind of mentorship of people like Tommy Dreamer, and of course Mick Foley, is something that's also part of his legacy. I mean, just outside of wrestling, outside of being a wrestler, like it's unbelievable. Like the influences he has had, him and his brother have had on wrestling. Like, like there's a lot of wrestlers who pattern themselves after him. Will tell you like, oh, Terry Funk was my favorite wrestler. Min's Teo in
Terry Boy.
Michinoku Pro. He was Terry Boy and he wrestled, his style of punching was patterned after Terry Funk because he was a huge Terry Funk fan. And a lot of people in the independent wrestling scene in Japan humongously owe a huge debt of gratitude to Terry Funk, and they often show it in their matches, like, or sometimes with how they dress. They like the famous, like, we have this image of him with his trunks over striped pants. Like that's sometimes you see, sometimes people pay homage to that look when they're honoring Terry Funk. Or like you have a lot of cosplay wrestlers in Japan, like people pretending to be other wrestlers. Like the most famous ones usually are like, Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody, but like Terry Funk can show up once in a while. People like pretending like, I'm going to dress like Terry Funk. And usually it's like this era of Terry Funk that they're dressing up as.
Yeah. When I see these tights, one of the things I remember about is that it's a very forgettable WCW run that he has in 2000. And there's a match that him and Chris Candido have where they end up in the horse stable. Do either of you remember this? And they're wrestling around an actual horse that like lifts its leg and like nails Terry with like this horse that nails him. And like this could have been just a disaster on an episode of Thunder. And I mean, it's just when you just sit down and you could go through hundreds of these different scenarios of Terry Funk, and they're just the most wide ranging, like a guy that can be attached to an episode of Thunder in 2000, and you can tie into Johnny Valentine in the mid 70s. Look at this. Way is on top of everything here. I mean, this was just, again, like you will never be able to duplicate a career like this that just had such a, like the most varied career that I think you could possibly paint. And when it comes to foreigners in Japan, like I don't think anyone would, well, where does a Terry Funk kind of level off at in terms of like influence in Japan when you're looking at like the biggest names of your Abdullahs, of Dick Byers, of Stan Hansen's? Is Terry Funk comparable, slightly below like those three? Like where is a Terry Funk, and what kind of coverage do you expect a Terry Funk to receive with his passing?
I think massive coverage in like Weekly Pro Wrestling for sure. I think
all the shows are
going to have like 10 bell salutes to him. New Japan, All Japan, Pro Wrestling Noah, they're all going to pay tribute to him, and I would imagine people are going to do Terry Funk spots in their matches for the next couple of weeks. Where does he stand in the pantheon? Like he's like in the top 4. Like, he's Stan Hansen, Brody, Abdullah, Terry Funk. I think he surpasses Dick Beyer. I think because Dick Beyer was of a certain generation, and like he helped, popularize Japanese wrestling in its heyday, at its start. But the people who, kind of shepherded to another level through the 70s through the 90s are Stan Hansen and Terry Funk and Abdullah the Butcher and Bruiser Brody. Those are the 4 that I would say have the most cultural impact to people. Like, who do you think of when you think of an American wrestling? If you ask a Japanese wrestling fan, they'll probably say Stan Hansen, but then they'll probably say Terry Funk, and then like Brody and I don't know like how many people think of Abdullah as an American wrestler, but as a foreign wrestler, he's up there for sure. But for like I do maintain Stan Hansen is like the pinnacle. He's at the top of the mountain, but right below him at the next plateau is probably Terry Funk.
As we wind this down, are there any? Is there one specific match that comes to mind? Are there any like matches that immediately come off the top of your head that you're drawn to with a Terry Funk? I
mean, like the stuff he did with Flair for sure. Like the crazy angles where he's like putting the plastic bag over Flair's head. that's like memorable. I would say
there's one where he like pours motor oil on top of his own head. I mean, the guy just went everywhere. Just like there was no there was no line he was not willing to like cross over just to get an angle over, whether it worked or not. And he was also a very, very sharp guy that could learn from angles that did work and didn't work. And I think that very much goes back to the mentality of growing up in a family that, I mean, you lived off of what you drew. And if an angle missed, it was like that affects your livelihood. And I think that very much informed his like business savvy throughout his career of learning from mistakes and understanding what draws, what doesn't draw.
Definitely like his run in All Japan. Like that's the thing I would recommend just to see, my God, the popularity he had. And then like a lot of the stuff he did with Dory Jr. as his partner. There's like the matches they have against Hansen and Brody. There's the matches they have against, Jumbo Tsuruta and Tenryu with different partners, the Road Warriors. Like there's a lot of fun stuff that you can see. But I think why I would recommend his All Japan stuff is because watch the connection he has with the fans and vice versa. It is amazing. Very, very few wrestlers have a connection with the Japanese audience that aren't Japanese as much as Terry Funk did.
Yeah, one to certainly check out is the Real World Tag League final. This was in '77, the first year that Dory and Terry won it against the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher. It's just a really famous match, and just the crowd is losing their minds by the end of it. But there's just such a wide variety that you can check out. But WH, I want to thank you so much. WH jumped on board really last minute, and I really appreciate us getting to kind of wax poetic about Terry Funk. I thought you would be awesome to have on. So thanks
for
much.
The invite. It's an honor to be able to talk about such an amazing influence on the history of professional wrestling, on the history of Japanese professional wrestling. And I'm just looking forward to all the tributes, and I'm looking forward to like a longer article from you, John, on the site. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like RIP Terry Funk forever.
All right. Thanks a lot, WH. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, WH.
And maybe a future long and winding royal road on Terry Funk down the road. But wait, when did Terry Funk first kind of, when do you have a first memory of Terry Funk?
Terry Funk's somebody who I'm sure I watched in several periods, but I don't know if I ever really noticed nor really, like, I would say became a fan until the King of the Death Match. And I was one of those people that saw those tapes, and I actually saw it through how did I believe they called it Stranglemania. I think we actually
where ICP does the commentary over it.
Yeah, I watched the matches with ICP doing commentary, and I completely fell in love with the whole
thing. Mick Foley got pissed because he wanted royalties off of those tapes.
Yeah, and I believe he did get something off of it. Whether or not Terry Funk did, I certainly hope so. But it's that, and then you dig into, of course, the exploding barbed wire death match with Onita. You talk about influence, like a John Moxley beyond, I think, the sort of inclinations towards the deathmatch wrestling. Just the sort of idea of being a journeyman in pro wrestling and doing everything on every single weekend, no matter how successful, how much respect you already have in the industry, to still continue to seek out novel experiences. I think that's what Funk represents to me.
I think his DNA is very much embedded in a John Moxley, where he is not taking bookings where it's going to be like, he's taking things that are like personal challenges and just not looking at size of venue. It's like, put myself in every situation I can possibly find myself in. And it was such a forgotten moment on television, but it was cool in the lead up to that Brock Lesnar match at WrestleMania that many years ago, when Terry Funk shows up, and it's essentially like a passing of the torch kind of moment with Terry Funk and Dean Ambrose, but was not really played up as all that much. But they did kind of get that moment on a WWE program. That was 2016. So we will have much more on Terry Funk. Again, a big thank you to WH Park for jumping on with me. There's so much to go into with a giant career of Terry Funk's. So on that note, I think we're just going to transition over to Dynamite, because there was quite a lot of news coming out of this go home edition of Dynamite, the Fyter Fest episode from the Gas South Arena in Duluth, Georgia. And we'll do an update of the card, because it does require some updating after this show. And they did start off with a graphic for Terry Funk. And this had to have been, like, I saw this news around like 4-ish. Like, this was really late in the day in terms of it. It would not surprise me at all if we see like a lot of Terry Funk inspired stuff at Sunday's show. I would think, like, just again, such an influential figure on so many of this generation and beyond.
I'm curious to see like how WWE might handle it, because they are, I guess, the keepers of a lot of that footage, But they did
put a video up today with like highlights of his different stuff and some of his Hall of Fame induction in 2009. I think he's one that's going to get like mentions on all the programs. Like Impact put out a statement, like everybody. And as WH said, like all the Japanese companies, like No and All Japan have shows this weekend. New Japan has no shows till September 8th, but especially for All Japan, like that is, I would say the Japanese group, the existing Japanese group that he is most affiliated with, like they're all going to do their 10 bell salutes. And I'm just, the tributes are going to be immense over the next couple of days. So the beginning of the show, we are teased with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks against Juice Robinson and the Guns, and they end up brawling on the floor before the bell ever rings, and Rick Knox gets taken out by Juice Robinson, and Jay White gets involved, and then Omega's fighting the Guns. Austin misses the Famouser and takes a Snapdragon, and this is where we are noted that Jay White and Omega have a bitter rivalry going back to their days in New Japan. And there's a V trigger to Jay White. Takeshita then runs in, nailing Omega. They're choking out Nick Jackson on the floor. FTR then arrive, and they attack Bullet Club Gold. And it's down to Omega and Takeshita in the ring. Omega lands a knee and goes for the one-winged angel. It's avoided. Takeshita rolls out of the ring, and then he gives the devious point to the sign, to the All In sign. And no Ibushi or Hangman part of this final angle. And this was a rare promoted match on AEW television that they did not deliver on, instead doing the brawl and non-start to the match.
Ibushi not appearing, for a brawl in America right before he has to fly to, England. I do get. I guess Paige's absence may be a little bit more peculiar, but it's not like it would have added that much more, but sure, like of course, when it comes to Paige being in the same building on the same night as the rest of the roster, namely
it's going to leave your audience asking questions,
I suppose. Sure. But the brawl itself, I thought it was a really hot tee up for the match on pay-per-view. But I did find it weird because it's really unlike AEW to advertise a match and not deliver it at all. So as a result, it felt a little bit unsatisfying. I don't know if I would have just advertised the match, unless there were other things going on that might have prevented this from actually taking place.
Well, if you notice, they also bumped the Jack Perry segment to Saturday. That was advertised for tonight. And I mean, they had so much stuff on this show. I can't count how many times I saw Renee Paquette in segments tonight.
Well, you remember they don't just have one pay-per-view to build, they have to sow the seeds for All Out as well.
Yeah, and we can talk about how effective that was by the end. Renee's first of a marathon of segments was a sit-down interview with MJF, and he states how the British people love him, makes fun of their crooked teeth, and says he is a modern-day Davey Boy Smith if Davey Boy was Jewish and a good public speaker. And he is the second coming of Winston Churchill. And if the fans are the loudest crowd ever, he's going to buy them all a pint before telling Renee he's lying. And admits, he gets serious here, that it's an immense amount of pressure he's under. It's the biggest event in pro wrestling. And this does not happen without the people that paved the way for me, like Hogan, Bruno, Dusty, Hunter, Undertaker, Cena, Triple H. He is standing on the shoulders of giants and may become a giant himself if he wins. And that's the pressure that he's ready for. And then Renee plays clips of the history of MJF and Adam Cole, and they focus on segments where they were showing cracks in the relationship. And MJF states that Adam Cole's a genuine friend, that's real, and that Cole's made him a better person. He has taught me to trust and let my guard down. Cole is not just my friend, he's my brother. And brothers fight, they push themselves, but at the end, they hug it out. And I've been vulnerable for the first time, and I'm asking you fans to go on this journey with me. And if you do, you will not be disappointed. And I am your scumbag. So a lot of ground here that they were setting things in motion for. But yeah, this was our first interview. How did you think it came across?
I thought it was a really good babyface interview from MJF. He has become the type of babyface that completely understands why the crowd likes him, but he does not change his character. He's still an asshole, but as he keeps saying, he's our asshole. And he's completely honed in on how to be likable while still being a complete jerk, or at least throwing, elements of being a complete jerk. I mean, it's what Steve Austin figured out all those years ago as well. I think they've done a remarkable job at, over these few months, convincing us that MJF and Adam Cole truly are close friends. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Like, how long has this really been, set up? 2 months, it feels like.
Mid-June, they had the dates on the videos.
Right, okay.
June 14th was the match. They had the time limit match.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous to think in 2 months' time they could convince us of this close relationship between these two. But I think they've done
it took
really
you
good
3
job.
years to like me.
Well, we didn't have Wembley to to main event, so maybe that drives things a bit faster. But it's thanks in large part to those corny ass vignettes. I mean, they 100% worked, and I would say they're more than responsible for a large chunk of the interest in this program.
Yeah, it's a really interesting program that is ultimately going to be judged by what the next chapter is in the program, because it's been a divisive one. There are people that can look and cite the success that the segments have had numbers wise, and others that just feel like it is a tone they don't want the AEW program to go in. And I mean, there's not like a right or wrong answer, but I think ultimately it's what is the next evolution of this. And if tonight's show, two things I really liked are that they are promising you like that next chapter occurs on Sunday, and they're teasing like a big angle to culminate in that match.
They're teasing one of these two turning. Basically.
That's what it is. And you're kind of torn of who it's going to be, or at least I think almost trying to make it as though MJF is this character that you're not supposed to trust and ultimately believe he is going to be the snake in this whole thing, even though all the hints are being set up the other way with Adam Cole. The other thing I really liked about this show was the constant mention of 80,000 people. They made you feel like this is a big, big show. And to me, you could not repeat that attendance figure more times on a show like this. Like that was, everything is designed for Sunday. And this is like, we have pay-per-views, but this is another level and you can't miss this show. I thought they hammered that home very effectively.
Agreed. Yeah, and they actually have that, I guess, hard number to be able to, completely like publish and promote at this point. I will say, I thought on this show, beyond like saying 80,000, they did a good job of telling you the importance of Wembley in several segments that we will talk about in the future.
Jon Moxley and Rey Fenix is the first official match on the show. And they had a very nice match here. Fenix did the rope walk, missing with the kick after taking a curb stomp on the floor. And Fenix escapes a rear naked choke and hits a rolling cutter and a frog splash for a 2 count. They're trading strikes from their knees. And then Moxley, who's going after the mask of Fenix, bites at him and stops a double underhook from Fenix off the turnbuckle to hit an avalanche Death Rider. And everyone thought this was the finish. Fenix kicks out and the place explodes, and Moxley goes immediately to the rear naked choke, and Fenix is fighting it, but he goes out at 13 minutes and 37 seconds. So Moxley gets the win, and then Claudio and Yuta enter with crowbars, and Kingston and Penta are out, and they get confronted by Ortiz, the returning Ortiz, who is on the ramp. And then coming from the back, Santana is no more. He is now Mike Santana. Mike Santana.
He gained a first name and also quite a few pounds of muscle, I will say, in his downtime.
This man has bulked up. Okay,
he's gone Super Saiyan.
He has certainly gotten heavier during his time away. So looking built here for this return. And Ortiz uses the Mad Ball. The Best Friends are out with Cassidy, and then Fenix is laid out in the ring. Now, correct me, I might have just missed it, but did they show the crowbar shot? Because I thought that they had missed, like, the key spot here was Fenix is taken out by the crowbar and is out cold in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, in the midst of, like, I guess the chaos of Ortiz coming out, Santana coming out, those guys brawling, you unfortunately did not get a clear view of Yuta delivering the crowbar shot to Fenix. No.
So it was Yuta that hit it.
It was Yuta, yeah.
Okay. So that's the big angle that, in theory, takes Fenix out, and Fightful had reported that Fenix was not expected to be on the show due to a travel restriction, so he appears to be out of the match. And then we have the announcers with the somber reaction to this horrible injury, and Excalibur, with his serious voice, has to move on to the DraftKings ad read and the prop bets that you can make. And the man, this was a tough transition to go from one mood to the next. Guys, this is just horrible, but DraftKings has you covered. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes. It's DraftKings.
Nothing will stop capitalism. No tragedy. No in-ring beatdown. But they did announce later on that it's going to be a 5-on-5 match.
So that is, and we have all the participants. Santana and Ortiz were high on people's list in terms of being 2 of the 3 mystery partners, and it turns out there will not be a third. So, and they were also very much promoting the Stadium Stampede mode that is available Thursday for the video game, and probably the rationale behind doing this match this week.
Doing this match, sure. Or you mean doing Stadium Stampede itself?
Doing Stadium Stampede.
I would say the rationale for Stadium Stampede likely would have been just, you're actually in a stadium as well. But I mean, maybe this just happened to be.
I mean, it all complements each other.
It's
Like, it
good
helps that
synergy,
you're pushing
isn't it?
this match for this new downloadable content for the show.
Yeah. I thought the angle overall was like a good angle to write Fenix off.
I mean, it sucks for the match. I mean, you're losing.
Sucks. It sucks
you're
for
losing
Ray
like
Fenix.
a great aspect to this match, like Fenix in a Stadium Stampede match. But I mean, it seems like this was out of their control.
And it sucks for Ray Fenix or anybody who, for whatever reason wasn't able to appear on this show. I thought that they would have taken the opportunity to, set up another surprise partner for Kingston and his team, and then another one for BCC. They're choosing not to do that. And maybe in terms of story, it's a little bit cleaner just having Santana and Ortiz come in as your big surprises. I don't
know if it was so, like, they were trying to get a lot in here, and I understand that they were against the gun, but at the same time, it was like, you did have all this time to flesh this out a bit, but Kingston's doing his best to look so despondent here. And I think that did require some explanation of like, okay, for like the guy's been gone a year. The other line in this was like, it's the former best friends, Santana and Ortiz. It was like, the last time I saw these guys on TV, they were teammates. Like, nothing on television explains like this falling out that these two have had.
Was that not in reference to them being Kingston's former best friends?
I thought that the line was the former best friends, meaning the two of them being former best friends. But if they mean Kingston, then that's one thing.
I at least didn't, like, other than the two of them coming out with separate entrances, I guess I didn't really get any indication that there was any on-screen in-story beef between Santana and Ortiz. And I would assume you wouldn't get that if they're teaming up together.
No. But
Given the AEW history between like Kinks, or at least like everybody involved here, I like the idea of like, Mox formerly being friends with Kingston, and then Kingston basically that friendship ruining for them ruining the friendship, and then Mox saying, well, I'm going to take your other best friends or former best friends, and I'm going to make them hate you as well. So I like the combination of these.
Renee is with, and we get the stretcher job for Fenix as well. And then Kingston was great here. And he tells the camera to just get out of his face. And Renee shows up to try and get a word. And Kingston is just, really? You're doing this? Did you see what your husband did? And Renee's in this position where she's just trying to be the broadcaster. And it is her husband that perpetrated this act. And Kingston says, what, you want me to fix it? In reference to the line a couple of weeks ago that Renee gave that they've not really followed up on. Remember when Renee got upset at Eddie Kingston and wanted him to fix this? And he said he's going to fix this at Wembley.
Right. So how's he? What does that mean? How does he intend on fixing this? By beating the shit out of her husband?
I don't know.
I guess
he's going to join the BCC. Like, he's now got
he's not going there to talk to him.
I don't know. I don't know what fix it means. Maybe it means he's going to ride a horse in the stands, like the video game preview.
Like maybe Terry Funk. That's the
dude. I mean, that guy loved
the Funk tributes.
Terry
I'm sure will be plenty. Or like if there's any place to have them, like a Stadium Stampede match, I feel like might be.
Yeah. Who's going to be the one that gets to wear the like the tights, the red, white, and black tights?
I'm sure they're all fighting over it.
Then Renee interviews Sammy Guevara. We literally went from Renee backstage, and then it was earlier today, and Renee is with Sammy Guevara and asks why he came to Jericho's aid, and he gets approached by Menard Parker and Daniel Garcia, stating that Guevara explains that Jericho is just blinded by a friendship of over 30 years with Don Callis, and Parker explains, well, you should not be blinded by your friendship with Jericho. You're always there for him. He isn't there for you. And they walk off, and Garcia just stares a hole into Guevara and walks away.
This, I would assume, is laying some sort of foundation for something at All Out involving at least Sammy, maybe Garcia as well.
Maybe they all come together to help Jericho, and they are now the reunited empire.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Shivani hosts the contract signing. Ospreay and Don Callis are out first, and he is followed by Chris Jericho with Sammy Guevara. Callis says he wants to end the career of the greatest of all time, that being Jericho, and he offered Ospreay Jericho's head on a platter and threw away his 34-year friendship with Jericho as a result, picking Ospreay over Jericho. And he brings up how a few years ago, Chris, you nearly died in England. and he will be in Ospreay's corner this Sunday to make sure that the job gets done this time. I mean, taking a very, very real story out of Jericho's history to add some heat to this match.
And this was the thing that spurred his, I guess,
this was
weight
where,
loss.
he was hospitalized and led to, the whole body transformation that he went through. But that was like December of 2021 that he was over there for the Fozzy concert and had to cancel those shows. Ospreay gets on the mic, and dude, this guy's promo was excellent.
Amazing.
He asks Jericho, "Are you taking this match seriously, or is this some vanity project just so your band can play at Wembley Stadium? This match is going to change my life," and explains that he has a 4.5-year-old stepson. And the day before All In, I'm wrestling on an indie. And you could hear Andy Quilden yelling, RevProOnDemand.com, RevProOnDemand.com, please, Will. He's like, I'm wrestling on an indie to make as much money as I can to support my stepson and put him through school. And I will become the only man to beat Omega, Okada, and Jericho within 2 months. And then my contract with New Japan is up in 6 months, and I will be worth millions. I'm the best wrestler in the world. I'm better than the Elite. I'm better than Danielson. I'm better than Punk, and I'm better than you. And he respects what Jericho has accomplished, but it's all rocket fuel for my future. Dude, Will Ospreay, this was right up there with his promo the night before the Kenny Omega match at the beginning of the year in Tokyo. But man, was he excellent.
Yeah, I mean, if this guy wasn't already going to be the hottest free agent come January, I think this promo completely amplified that stature to a whole new level, because it showed that he's not just a guy, and we all know this. Like, anybody who saw that promo, like in Japan, before Wrestle Kingdom. Yeah. Or just really any of his recent work recently, I think already knows this, but I don't know how much the general public would know this, because I think to a lot of people, he's still maybe a guy, known for having 6-star rated matches in the Observer. And he's clearly not just that anymore. He's a guy who can now talk really well. He's showing everybody that he's the full package. And that's something that not only AEW can make a lot of money off of, but obviously their competition as well. So I would contend that this is probably the single most important promo thus far of Will Ospreay's life, given the platform and just given the quality of it. He told the audience who he was. He's a guy who beat Omega and Okada within a 2-month span, gave you his motivation, not just for this Jericho match, but for all of his wrestling matches. He has to make money for a 4-year-old stepson at home. And he also built up the stature of Wembley to a Brit, and also somehow promoted Rev Pro in the process. And this was all in 2 to 3 minutes. So he did a whole lot here and did a great job setting up not just the match, but himself.
Oh, imagine if Excalibur had to run down the Rev Pro card for Saturday night on top of it.
Maybe wait for Friday.
Jericho has to respond to this. He doesn't think that Ospreay would have accomplished all of these things without Jericho. He says, a few years ago, all these people were predicting you'd be in a wheelchair by the time you were 30. And this was a very real thing, a very, legitimate concern that people had of Ospreay. And Jericho called him. He cold called him 5 years ago, telling him to tone it down. I would have loved to have known how that started. Do you think he introduced himself first? He's like, hey, this is Chris Jericho calling, or is he getting right to the meat of the message immediately as Will picks up?
I don't know, maybe some casual talk about
let it go to voicemail.
Yeah, maybe, who knows.
He says that without me, you wouldn't have had the longevity to become one of the top stars. And this match has been in the works for years. It was supposed to happen at Wrestle Kingdom in 2021. And now it's happening at the biggest show in history, the biggest show of my career. This is bigger than any WrestleMania, bigger than any Tokyo Dome. And I'm coming at it from the top of the mountain, where every social media dipshit is predicting my demise. And Ospreay, you need to be at your best to beat me. Prove it to your family, prove it to your countrymen that you can beat Chris Jericho. And then Ospreay knocks the microphone out of Jericho's hands. Jericho slaps him, and they have a big pull apart. And listen, you could certainly look like this was a program that had to be rushed, and you were limited by the fact that one half of this program was off in the G1 for the last 5 weeks. This segment I thought was tremendous. Like they, to me, cemented this as one of the key matches on the show. And no, they're very much going for, like, certainly, like, Will is the home country star in this match, but I think they're going into this match with the idea the crowd goes one way, goes back and forth. Like they just want to create a spectacle kind of atmosphere. And I think that they're going to achieve it. And
well, it's going to start off with Judas, right? And this entire 80,000 arena stadium, will be singing along to that song. And if
did you see this opening, the pay-per-view, because of the Judas song? And that's the big start.
But I think it would be successful really at any point. But that sing along, I think in itself is going to be a big draw for this particular match, and that's going to be a big baby facing segment for Chris Jericho. So yes, like when they announced the match, I did have concern about like how you could push a Will Ospreay as a heel against the babyface Chris Jericho, but I'm more of the opinion now it'll probably be a double babyface thing, unless Ospreay of course goes in there and maybe joins in with Don Callis and cuts some sort of like anti-England promo, which I don't see being successful nor happening.
No, I hope they don't fight that. I think they've set the table well, and I think they're going into it with like however the crowd reacts, they react, and I think you're not going to have an indifferent crowd, and that's ultimately the goal of this one.
The point, like the only ingredient that's required is motivation for both men, and they both established theirs in a segment like this. I thought this, off of a great, really strong Will Ospreay promo, Jericho, I thought was also on top of his game, cut a really great veteran go home promo, expressed the personal importance of this particular event to him. This is something I think I almost wish every ex-WWE wrestler was saying in the month leading up to All In, talking about how this is more important to them than any other WrestleMania, any other Tokyo Dome. Really build up
this
the
is
idea.
Bigger than any Rock and Rager at sea.
Well, I don't know about that, man. Those are some big ones. But like convey to an audience who might not be listening to a podcast like this just how big of a deal the event itself is, and it's not just about you should be telling people 80,000, but like more importantly than talking about 80,000, talk about how it's bigger than a WrestleMania. It's bigger than like big events that I think people completely understand and have sort of like reference for. So they did a great job here, like building this up from what I sensed a lot of to a lot of people was a bit of a disappointing announcement in prior weeks, but now I'm really looking forward to it.
Darby, we go backstage. First, Renee's doing her sit down with Adam Cole. And this was interesting. She goes to the highlights, and it's all the clips of the two of them getting along and laughing and the stuff out of the ring as well as in the ring, and none of the tension like she had shown to MJF. And Cole says he thinks the world of Max professionally, but appreciates how he's helped Adam find himself and who the real Cole is, coming back from his injury. And he got into wrestling to be the best. And he's won lots of titles, but the AEW title solidifies you as the best wrestler on the planet. I don't want to win this match. I need to win this match, and I will. And then the issues involving Roderick Strong and the Kingdom are brought up by Renee, and she shows more clips here. And these are all the clips of Cole nearly turning on MJF, all these different points when he had the chance to, and then either MJF caught him or Adam Cole thought twice. And Cole is getting very disturbed by this, and he just snaps. He gets up. He's going to walk out on the interview and says, "Why can't people process that our friendship is real?" And he yells into the camera, "There are no issues between me and Max." And that's how things end. So you're leaving this with the idea that that Adam is the one here that you are more suspicious of.
Yeah. I thought it was certainly, I almost felt it was a little heavy-handed how much they were trying to lead you towards thinking Cole would be the one who's turning, because he snapped here. He's the one kind of expressing like sort of dishonorable quality here against poor Renee.
See, I think at the level that they are thinking about, and this might be overthinking to a degree, is that they're making it so heavy-handed that everyone's believing, okay, it really is going to be MJF that turns on this guy. Like, I think that is what they are thinking of here. It's the
sure. Honestly, we could think ourselves into any possibility. Like they could do whatever they want, and because I think of the variance of like what exists within professional wrestling angles, some of us are going to overthink it, and a lot of us are going to underthink it, and whatever. Like, bottom line, are we interested? Am I continuing to maybe guess who's going to turn? I think, at least for me, the answer is yes. The type of like maybe line I really appreciated that was just a little bit more subtle was when he said, you know, they continue to hammer home, like, he's reminded me who the real Adam Cole is. And that, of course, you know, could be a line indicating him returning to his true nature of being a heel. Overall, I thought this set of interviews was really good to just not only put the spotlight on this main event, but to remind the audience of the scene so far that were relevant, and to again continue play with the audience's sort of like expectations of who might be heel and who might be babyface.
Okay, we have a lot to unpack from this tornado tag match. Okay, Darby Allin and Nick Wayne against Swerve Strickland and AR Fox, with Nick Wayne's mother in the front row, and AR Fox comes out and he's wearing the bloody shirt that they took from Nick Wayne after they trespassed to his wrestling school, left him in a bloody mess after taking a photo of his dead father and busting it over his head. Okay, let's keep in context here with what's going on here. So there was some spectacular stuff, as you can imagine, in a tornado match involving these four. We saw a double Wayne's World to the floor, then a coffin drop by Darby onto both Swerve and Fox. They fight into the crowd. Nick Wayne's nose is all bloody, and he's dragged in front of his mother, who was great here in reacting to her just horror at what her son was being put through. There's a double team neckbreaker on Wayne, and Darby makes the save, and then Swerve is placed onto the chair on the floor, and then Darby gets nailed by Fox. They seat down Darby on the chair and is hit with a Swerve stomp, and then it's just kick out after kick out by Nick Wayne. Fox finally misses with a 450 splash, and Nick is able to catch him with kind of a European clutch and pins Fox in 9 minutes and 55 seconds as Darby holds on to Swerve. And then we got into all of the post-match, but let's just park it there. What did you think about the match?
I thought it was a really good match. I think of a similar caliber and style to what you've been seeing as of late with Nick Wayne, Darby Allin team up. Spectacular. And AR Fox and Swerve are a great tag team. And I think the
legacy tag team, like they could go on years.
Oh, their future is really bright. I think, you know, they can win the tag titles. They can have a great run.
So Swerve starts laughing on the microphone and he calls AR Fox disappointing. How do you blow every opportunity you're given? Why are you such a loser? And he explains to Fox, this was a test. You couldn't even beat an 18-year-old child. How can I trust you in this match and trust you in front of 80,000 people? You can take a shot. And thus, Prince Nana fires AR Fox, who is then attacked by Brian Cage as Fox is hit with the drill claw. And I'm watching this, and I think everyone is thinking, oh man, there's some issue where AR Fox cannot be part of this show, and thus he is being written off of the match. Darby and Nick Wayne return with Sting, and the place goes nuts to see Sting. And Darby tells AR Fox, you changed my life, and I'll never forget that, and I'll always credit you with that. And Darby extends his hand. AR Fox accepts the gesture, and they are helped up, and Darby says, I love you. And they hug. And Nick Wayne is like, this guy was just wearing my bloody shirt that he threw at my mother after breaking into my school, and we're cool. We're cool, I guess.
Well, listen, people have short-term memories in professional wrestling, and it's a very black and white world. Okay, you're either with me or you're against me.
Worn the bloody shirt tonight, could that have been maybe the way to go?
Well, I mean,
there was a lot of forgiveness here on behalf of Nick Wayne, okay? To just accept this guy.
That's what the Bible preaches.
And then allow this guy into the match with them.
Well, listen, he's a good guy, okay? Why hold on to a grudge any longer than you need to, okay?
This guy crossed state lines to break into his wrestling school and bust his head open with a photo of the man's father.
Oh, and Darby retaliated, okay? They interfered at Fox's indie show. and now they're even. Okay, and I mean Nick Wayne, I'm sure he'll buy him like Waffle House later, and all will be okay.
So now we've adopted AR Fox onto the babyface team, so they have 4, and Fox and Brian Cage, Swerve and Brian Cage are 2, and they're asking, who do you guys have? So I guess Swerve had already hired his backup. He was ready for this. He knew this is how this was all going to be, and that Fox would be forgiven and brought into their team, and they would need 2 more.
Okay, so I'm guessing you missed the match announcement.
What match announcement?
So it's still a tag team match, but it's Christian and Swerve as the team now.
It's Christian and Swerve.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I did miss this.
So they exchanged one cage for another.
I came out of this where I thought we were up to 4-on-4. We introduced all these other people.
I completely feel the same. I thought it was a bit of a confusing segment, at least in that sense, because like you had, I guess traditional wrestling storytelling tells you, okay, this Brian Cage attacked AR Fox, so I'm assuming it's Swerve and Brian Cage versus Sting and Darby, and then
AR Fox is off of the show.
So he is off the show. Yes.
Okay.
It seems.
Sorry, this was I'm sure there's some extenuating factor that they had to get to this, but man, this was a mess. I thought it was messy. This was so confusing. The fact that I'm taking notes, dude, and I didn't know what the match was by the end of it.
No, completely.
I'll take some of the blame for that. I did miss the graphic.
I mean, I was just as confused as you until they showed this graphic. I didn't think it was necessary for Brian Cage to appear at that in the way that he did. I think it would have been more effective if you had Luchasaurus, perhaps. But then people might have assumed Luchasaurus was going to join the team. Anyway,
I also hate the dissolution of AR Fox with Swerve. Like I hate it. Like he turned like weeks ago and. Like he was fine as a babyface, but he was just a guy as a babyface. This was a great role for him in the Mogul Embassy. I don't know what the purpose was other than you got him out of the match. You could have injured him, but obviously they want him out of the group. Like they certainly could have done something to eliminate him.
Agreed.
Another way.
Yeah. So again, Tony basically said that there would be changes to the card coming to Dynamite. We can on Dynamite. We can only assume that this was one of the 2 that we saw tonight. Very disappointing for AR Fox for whatever reason. If he's unable to make this match, clearly the biggest match
by leaps and bounds. Like this guy will probably never have an opportunity to be at this size of a crowd before. I mean that's gutting.
But beyond that, losing this role in the Mogul Embassy, I think really
it's a double whammy. It's not just losing the show. It's like you've lost your. I think you've lost your push. Like even if they come back with a feud out of this, I just think it's man. You had so much to. Those 2 were just gelling, and you had just gotten this off the ground.
You've extinguished like the heat to the AR Fox character, and that's somebody who feels like he's pissed off. And now he could. I hope he still finds that fire somehow. Obviously, clearly they see plenty of talent, and he's really impressed. I would say in all these matches in the spotlight over the past month. But man, like extinguishing the Darby feud and taking him out of the Mogul Embassy, I wonder if they needed to do that because I really feel like his presence almost completed the Mogul Embassy to me. He was a guy with story that Swerve can also have to use against Nick Wayne and Darby, and I hope they have a good reason for why they cut this off so quick.
So Christian and Luchasaurus come out, and Christian introduces himself to Nick Wayne. And says, I understand you have a father that has died. And the whole crowd is just groaning. They're like, oh my God. He says, well, I've heard he's a pro wrestler, but I never heard of him. So he must not have been any good. And a talentless hack like that, there's not a lot that you have to live up to. And he warns him that this Sunday, if you come to Wembley in this coffin match, it's going to be deja vu with you watching the coffin door shut on someone you love. And the whole crowd starts chanting asshole. And then Christian says, if you play it right, I'll be there as your mentor afterwards, and calls himself the TNT champion. Now you can certainly debate the level. And I do hope it's not just using the father for every Nick Wayne program. I think it's going to get very, very lazy. I do have to say though, Christian, it was an excellent heel promo, and this audience was just repulsed by him. And
you don't have to be ashamed about it, John. Like, I mean, this is the character. He, I guess
it is,
filling
but
the role.
I'm just saying, like, we've gone from one program where Buddy Wayne was the focus, and I don't want it to be just the crux of every Nick Wayne program that we're just going to use this for easy heat. But it's at this point, it was a very effective promo for establishing
It's
Christian.
the main source of his identity, and he unfortunately happens to be up against a guy who kind of has made his name in AEW for insulting people using their dead parents, with the Jack Perry feud, of course. So Christian did not disappoint here. I goddamn, I thought this was a
I'm sure
borderline.
Darby's willing to forgive him, though. Give him a week. He'd be okay.
Well, listen, a hug solves everything.
FTR and the Young Bucks. So this was a sit down with Renee in the back. So we did get all four out in the arena, but they decided not to do this face to face in the ring. And I think the setting probably worked better for what this would not have done well in an arena setting for what
I mean, it would have been Cash's first in-ring promo since all the news, and I wonder how.
Well, I just think for such a dialogue heavy segment as this was, I think it would have been really tough with a live crowd behind them, even discounting the Cash stuff, which you might have gotten cat calls or taking people's attention away with that. So they taped the segment, and FTR says that they have not been coming to the Bucks' aid recently because they like them. They just don't want any excuses at All In. They acknowledge that it's the biggest match of their careers. And Nick cuts in stating that, we're made guys. We don't need to win this match, whereas you guys need to win this to put yourselves in the history books. And he adds, and I feel very strongly about that, dude. I thought, Nick, that was like the best line of this whole thing. Like, just such a cocky demeanor behind him. And Dax, his reactions were just like, man, I can't believe he said that out loud. And dude, Cash was like a mute here. Like, he had one line and then he was silent for the rest of this. So Harwood did most of the talking for FTR. He says the only thing that stands in the way of our legacy is the Young Bucks. And Matt says, listen, before you just go on and on about feeding your family, let's remember how you're able to feed your family with what we brought, what we created here in AEW. Matt says the fact is that when we decide to hang up our sneakers, we're going to finally get our flowers, and everyone is going to admit that we were the best tag team ever. Whereas when you guys are done, they're going to remember you as the guys that we named on our YouTube show. And Dax is just, oh man, I can't believe it. And Dax says that they are the foundation.
Your Dax sounds a lot like Jim Ross.
Well, I'm working. It's a long ways away. And he's going to break their foundation in front of 80,000 people. And Cash just like nodded. He's like, just going to keep it to Dax. And that was the segment. So, I mean, I don't care how the Bucks come across this. They're not going to be heels in front of this crowd. It's just going to be an audience going nuts. And the promise that, like, realistically, like, this is maybe the number 2 match on the show in terms of, like, I would say, honestly, like, you like Adam Cole and MJF seems pretty solidified to go on last. But this, in many ways, like, Ospreay and Jericho certainly, I think, up the ante of their match. But this is pretty big match for the show.
I agree. I mean, I think you could maybe suggest Stadium Stampede, just maybe based on the name value of the match type, and maybe that might have a bit of a shot at being the second most interesting match on the card. But I would say this is like probably the one match on the show that probably didn't require any significant build. It was the type of Ospreay Omega announcement or an Okada Danielson announcement that I think you could have just like put out there. That's no excuse though for, I mean, maybe not pushing certain elements of this that I think they could have done better. I think the entire match here has been built on like a double babyface basis, and as a result, we've not really seen any sort of building of tension other than maybe in the last portion of this particular interview segment with those lines from Matt Jackson. But I I think the match itself is more so built on the legacy of what they've established so far, and the idea that whoever is going to win this trilogy is going to somehow, like, you know, be the best tag team in the world. I feel like they could have done a little bit more, like, to tell us the story of their history, you know, just to maybe tell us like what happened in the first 2 matches, you know, tell us about the history of these two dating back to all the way from being the Elite. We've had, you know, interactions in the form of these sort of like run-ins and saves, and I don't know how much ultimately all of that served to explain the legacy of this to somebody who might not be aware.
Yeah, I think that this is one where I think they're somewhat coasting on the idea that it's the rivalry. It's 1-1 and we're having the deciding factor, and it should be this incredible match. And there's going to be some that demand more out of
well, then tell the story of the trilogy.
Well, for them, I mean, maybe they just figure like it almost explains itself. Like this feels like the program that they felt the most comfortable of just presenting, and there's very little more we need to do for it. And there's pros and cons to that thought. I do feel like this is going to be like everyone on this card. Like this is pretty much for everyone. This is like the biggest match of their careers that they are going to be looking to go out and have that classic match that is ultimately going to be the match that is most remembered for this match. Like you have this audience that like they're all going to want to go out and have their version of like the Savage Steamboat. Like that's what they want to replicate.
Mm-hmm.
We had a video for Storm and Saraya against Hikaru Shida and Britt Baker for Rampage on Friday night. And that was our plug for Friday. Ruby Soho took on Skye Blue, and Ruby Soho has her eyes set on Chris Statlander, which is not happening on Sunday, but I'll assume it's probably happening the next weekend, you would think?
I would assume so, yeah.
Soho attacks Skye Blue as her inset promo is airing. And I don't know if this seemed to be like a TSN issue, but they had some crazy problems.
Oh, it happened on Fight as well.
It did happen on
like
Fight.
Blackouts, yeah.
You had different blackouts and the sound went down, but then when we would go to commercial break, the audio of the commercials would air while an AEW Dynamite logo was on the screen. And this happened for multiple commercial breaks. So you couldn't see the commercial, but you could hear the commercial. And that, I assume, was a TSN.
Interesting. So they couldn't do the picture-in-picture.
There was a few picture-in-pictures. In the main event, it just went straight to a normal commercial break, and we did see it.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Weird.
Yeah. Anyway, the match went 7 minutes, 15 seconds. They were trading a lot of covers. Like the audience was not as engaged in this one. There was a Skyfall onto Ruby for a 2 count, and then Soho makes her comeback with the No Future, followed by Destination Unknown to get the pin and to hammer home the point. She looked into the camera and she has her eyes on Chris Statlander.
Mm-hmm. I think it's
in front of 9,000 people is what she
I think it's kind of impressive that they still managed to find time to, you know, build a bit of for All Out in such a busy show that had to do so much heavy lifting as a go home show for All In. But ultimately, we're going to be here next week and we'll be talking about how effective this build has been for All Out, because we don't.
Do you have any issue with them going into this pay-per-view with All Out in the structure that it is now? Like we have, I think, 2 matches announced for All Out.
Like do I have an issue?
Just like, do you think they should have done more, or do you think that would have been too much like confusion to be having like your top matches?
Well, for whatever reason, they decided to pair these 2 events back to back. I mean, clearly was not ideal, because I think it probably harmed both events in a bit of a way. It certainly hasn't maximized, you know, interest in both, with the 2 of them being so close. So I don't think they've done a great job building All Out, certainly 2 weeks out, but it's not their priority, or at least it's not as big of a priority, at least for now, as Wembley.
Renee is with Roderick Strong in the Kingdom. Roderick Strong not in a wheelchair or anything, so when he kicked the car last week, he I guess his foot is okay. And he says that at the end of All In, we're going to find out who the real MJF is, and we're going to find out who the real Adam Cole is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice tease.
They re-aired the House of Black video where they destroyed Daddy Ass's boots. So the Acclaimed, they were like, okay, we watched this video on Collision. We are not watching it again tonight on Dynamite. This is it. They stormed out to the ring and they get on the mic. No more fun and games. They're calling out the House of Black and they want a fight. So the lights go out. The House of Black come out. It's a 3-on-2 attack. Brody King has a chain wrapped around his fist when the Acclaimed's music hits, and out comes Daddy Ass. He has made his return, doesn't have his wrestling boots on, and he comes in and says, well, now you have my attention. I was okay leaving my great career behind, but then you guys jumped Max and Anthony. You busted open Max, and then you destroyed my boots and broke down a legacy of 32 years. It's like, Billy, that's not how you destroy a legacy. I don't think they died with your boots, but obviously very symbolic for this man who, nonetheless, he says that I have done things that will go down in history in this industry. I'm a Hall of Famer, and you pissed all over it. So he says, one more time, all or nothing, and I'm going to take everything from you. But unfortunately, Daddy Ass can't make the trip. And you honestly heard some like the audience was like, oh, him too? He can't go to England? What's going on? And he says, but there's another guy who can. And there's a badass coming to London, and his name is Monty Sop. Billy Gunn is coming to London.
I thought maybe we'd get the one.
Oh man,
a Shoguns reunion.
What if Tony Khan had secured Ass Man for Wembley?
That one might be a bit harder to come by.
Tougher. What if Elton John covered Ass Man?
So he actually had his retirement tour last month. So I don't think that's happening. Nor is Saturday Night's.
What if he comes back for one time, all or nothing? Okay, they take Elton John's platform shoes and they're put into a compactor, and then Elton John storms out at Wembley. It says,
"Well, if there's anything that can get Elton John out of retirement, it would be the House of Black. I'm sure
that would be it." This is a good setup. I mean, you knew this was the direction it was going, and it was only a question of which show this would land on. And personally, like I think having an Acclaimed rap on this show is a pretty cool thing that you and doing they should win these titles, even if it's not a long run, and then you get the scissoring at the end of the match.
I don't know. I kind of like House of Black keeping the championships, you know.
This is so easy way. Like they should absolutely win this one.
Why?
They can lose the belts in 3 weeks. This is like a giant pop for the end. This has been the whole story.
You get giant pops on the other,
finally winning on the third try.
I mean, I think they could still win the tag team championships. You know, I think the House of Black is just so like there's such a money team, you know, and I think you have so much more that you could do with them with an uninterrupted run beyond maybe Max Caster's rap. You know, I think an 80,000 plus arena full of people with a House of Black entrance with their cell phones out, I think that's going to be amazing.
Then we had the rundown for Collision. So for Saturday night, and this is being taped as we speak, the 8-man all-star tag team is CM Punk, Darby Allin, Sting, and a mystery partner taking on Brian Cage, Luchasaurus, Jay White, and Swerve Strickland with Samoa Joe on commentary. Orange Cassidy, Eddie Kingston, and Penta against Butcher, Blade, and Kip Sabian. Jack Perry, who gave the FTW title 2 extra hours of existence, will retire the title. And we will hear from the stars in London.
That's right. Yeah. Clips. I'm trying to look up who this mystery partner is.
Okay. Well, if you see it,
share.
I don't know if the match might not. Well, it should be pretty close to main event time by.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll find out by the end of this, and we will give a spoiler warning. So,
okay.
All right.
And then Aussie Open against the Hardys for the ROH tag titles. It was your final match of the night. Chance for the Hardys. Delete Chance. They're fighting on the floor around the ring. They come back. We've got about 4 minutes left, or so we thought, but Tony Khan paying for that overrun. They get the heat on Jeff. He hits a whisper in the wind. In comes Matt. They hit a superplex splash combo. Davis is in for the save. And then Fletcher just hits a power bomb to Matt, and they hit a double team cutter to Jeff. Clean win for Aussie Open, which is probably the right way to go here, setting them up for MJF and Cole on Sunday. And after the match, Davis tells the crowd in Georgia to shut up, and Fletcher explains that on Sunday, there will be no double clothesline, no kangaroo kick, and we will still be champions. In this crowd where it's like, no, we want that goddamn kangaroo kick. So MJF and Cole come out together. They go face to face. They brawl. And then Aussie Open get the advantage and they call for the double clothesline, but MJF jumps on the back of Davis. They then set up for their own double clothesline. Davis escapes. The people are pissed. MJF calls for the kangaroo kick. They're even more excited. And then Davis nails MJF, and MJF stops Fletcher from attacking Cole from behind, and he holds him for a super kick. Cole goes for the super kick, and as Fletcher gets out of the way, MJF catches the super kick, and they go nose to nose. MJF holds up the belt and then walks off, and he puts his ring on, and we continue to wonder, are they going to come to blows? But instead, Max puts the ring in his pocket, and the two hug to end the show.
Good closing segment. I thought, well, the match itself, I mean, I don't know if it necessarily got to a level that I'm used to seeing for an AEW main event, but I thought maybe it was
I didn't think the match was anything special.
It was a bit rushed, probably.
Four of the minutes were a complete commercial break for me as well on TSN.
But I thought the Hardys looked pretty good, actually. Wrestling like this sort of main event level, like Aussie Open type of pace. They're not going to be on All In, and I don't know if now is really even the time. It seems like Jeff, is still really kind of building himself back up, and really the team itself is really trying to build itself back up. So I don't have much of a problem with that, but a good showcase for Aussie Open and great continued teasing of Adam Cole and MJF and their rivalry, like having that sort of cliched, like holding your victim and then moving out of the way so that you might kick your own tag team partner was really the perfect thing for them to instigate a face-to-face, and this crowd ate it all up. So all in all, I thought this was a really good go-home show.
This match is going to be something to watch. That two of the loudest pops on the show are going to be for a pump kick and a clothesline.
Yeah. Do we know what the kangaroo kick looks like?
I'm sure it's just like a jumping pump kick. I'm sure that's what it is. But I guess that's
so.
The intrigue.
It's the mystery.
Maybe it's going to be like some spinning roundhouse that he busts out, or a spinning wheel kick.
You know what? We'll have to tune in to find out.
Here is your updated card for All In, which is now up to 10 matches. So we have one match announcement for the 0 hour, which starts at noon Eastern on Sunday. Do you expect anything more to be added to this, or do you think you just keep it to the one match on the pre-show?
I think it's just this match. I mean, it sounds like they'll open, because I mean they're trying to bookend the entire event with MJF and Cole, and for that reason I don't see anything following this either, unless of course it's some sort of battle royal, which I don't think you're missing on a show like this.
No. FTR against the Young Bucks for the AEW tag titles. Just the way they've set this up, I feel like FTR is winning this match, unless they the way this was set up. It feels like this is the big win for FTR.
I think so as well. I think there's still, a lot to do with this run for FTR. Bucks certainly, I would suggest maybe neither team needs the championships, but I think the Bucks need the titles a lot less than FTR does. I hope they continue to establish this run and, defend it on Collision.
Hikaru Shida, Toni Storm, Saraya, and Britt Baker, the four-way for the women's championship. I guess the obvious one here is if you had any intention of a Saraya title reign, this is the time to do it, even if it's a very short title reign. I mean, that would be, this would be the time to do it. I think Toni Storm, I love this new character. She does not need this title in the least.
I agree. I think if you're going to crown Saraya at any point in her AEW career, this would be the evening. I mean, it'd be a huge babyface reaction, but so what? She'll turn heel the next night. On when she's back in America, it would be a great moment. So I wouldn't, but I also don't discount either Toni Storm winning it nor Hikaru Shida retaining it, because I think she's only had the belt for what 2-3 weeks.
I'd leave it on Shida, but I mean, you could also go the direction of Saraya wins this, and that sets her up with the falling out with Toni Storm, who just loses her mind that her friend won the title, and that's another. And you get a babyface run for Saraya after this. I think that's one possibility. But you're right, Shida, you could just keep on going with her.
I guess Saraya is still, I think, a bit of a question mark when it comes to singles match quality. We've only seen, I believe, that one match, right? Against Britt.
Is that the only singles match she's done? It
It's
might
just
be.
hard for me to remember like any significant one. And when you're in AEW, it's a really high level, especially if you're a woman's champion. So do they have that confidence in her to actually hold the championship? I mean, we'll see. But it'll be a great moment if she does win. Yeah.
Darby and Sting against Swerve Strickland and Christian Cage. I think that your baby faces are winning this one.
I gotta think so too. I mean, unless Luchasaurus gets involved, of course. This is now really a prelude to Luchasaurus versus Darby Allin. But I think I would give it to Allin and Sting. Yeah.
I mean, they're really, Tony Khan's kind of pushing now the fact that Sting is like undefeated in this AEW run, that I see them, that's there for a reason. And like ultimately, I think like this Sting run, at some point you should do him going for the title for one big match, and that's where you cash in like an undefeated streak or something like that when you have the right champion to go for. But it also, you want to work, I think, that into like when the final run of his career is going to be, and it sounds like they don't really know when this guy wants to wind it down. I mean, 64 is like the new 40.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, it's this guy will be diving off of balconies into his senior citizenship years, I'm sure. Thank you, chat room. They're reminding us that Saraya beat Skye Blue to qualify for the 4-way, so that was another singles match. But pretty,
I'm looking for like, when I say singles match of like
on a pay-per-view level, like extended love. Yeah.
The Golden Elite, Kota Ibushi, Kenny Omega, and Hangman Page against Konosuke Takeshita, Juice Robinson, and Jay White. I think like given the size of this venue and the like, you kind of lean towards like feel good wins. I think this is one where if you're going with Omega and Takeshita, I think Omega taking a loss here is fine if that's where you're going the next weekend with the match in Chicago, and you do want to have some heel wins on this show, and this would be one that I would look at as having that potential.
I agree. Maybe beyond like Takeshita being the one to pin Omega, which probably would be the better finish. I mean, clear. I hope this means they're building up to Jay White versus Kenny Omega as well. I mean, they have to be after the attack angle last week, right? So, wherever they decide to do that match, I'd argue that match is bigger than Takeshita versus Omega. But I'm sure
you've been doing the program for so long with Takeshita, you need to pay that one off.
Agreed. Yeah.
Stadium Stampede. This one to me, like the outcome of like the winners is irrelevant. I'm just more curious of how they pull this one off, like what is in the stadium versus pre-taped stuff, how the audience responds. If there's stuff that, I mean, you have enough people that you can have people going on in the stadium while you just the way that this is shot and aired on television, and conversely in the stadium for everyone. That's where my interest is more so in this one rather than the booking of this one, because certainly there are a lot of different outcomes that you can go with here. And this is probably one of those matches that I'm sure Pac was going to be heavily featured into this program with the walkout at Blood and Guts and just all the changes this one has undergone.
Well, if they're going to do a cinematic match, maybe there's an opportunity for somehow Fenix and Pac to pre-tape something and having that match.
Put Fenix in front of a green screen.
An AI version of Fenix and Pac having, some interaction inside a room. I don't see really any cinematic elements for this. It just doesn't seem like, they've had instances where they could have done that with Moxley, and it just doesn't seem like something he'd be willing to do, or he'd want to do. I see this being very much like an Anarchy in the Arena,
what if he does a cinematic walk to the ring and he like takes a big hit out of a blunt on his way to the ring?
That is what are laws like in England? I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe he'd have to tape it in Amsterdam.
Well, he has an out. He can just say that was filmed in Amsterdam.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, as if this guy could look any cooler. So I'm looking forward to this, man. Like, I would use it to give a lot to Santana or Ortiz, as guys that are just kind of coming in. And if you want to make a big splash with either of them, having them feel like the spotlighted, figures, I think would be great.
Yeah, you've got the Kingston Claudio build up for this one. I think that Cassidy and Moxley, I think you could certainly expect that for All Out as a potential way to go in this whole thing. And as much as like I don't think they get enough kind of focus, like, dude, the best friends are always great in these situations. I think they are so consistent, and again, it's like everyone's going to just have like they're working shoes on and then some in a lot of these big matches. And for Santana, like, dude, this guy had a whole year plus that he has been out, and he's coming back on this kind of a platform. And he put up a message tonight and just indicated, like, it was like, he said, like, I'm going to share my story at some point, but it was like a really rough time off, which I'm sure it was for that amount of time for him. So that's like, you're being thrown right into the deep end here on the way back. Will Ospreay against Chris Jericho. I'm really looking forward to this one. I know that some people have been critical of this one, but man, I think that this is going to be, certainly if you're getting the level of a Jericho that we had seen throughout last year, and for such a big match here. I'm also interested to see how he works here with a Will Ospreay. Like, this is going to be a different match than you saw with like Will and Kenny Omega, but I thought they did as effective a job as you could on this go home segment tonight.
Well, it could very much be like Jericho versus Omega, perhaps, like you'd expect Jericho. I mean, it'll be interesting because like in that most instances, you're getting Chris Jericho as a heel against a high flyer. And how will they work this match with Jericho supposedly playing a babyface? Will he still take control throughout most of the match, slow things down in order to set up a Will Ospreay kind of comeback? That part is going to be a little bit interesting. But anytime you have Will Ospreay on any show, it's a potential match of the night, maybe even match of the year. I'm not necessarily expecting this one to be better than Ospreay Naito or Ospreay Omega, but it could be up there and could certainly be one of Chris Jericho's best matches in his entire career. And with the setting as well. Yeah, I'm not sleeping on it. I think a lot of the reaction we saw was because of heightened expectations from a lot of people hoping to see the next chapter of Omega versus Ospreay. And now we're kind of like a week plus past that. We can enjoy this for what it is. And I think certainly tonight's promo did a great deal of heightening my own interest.
Do you see Ospreay winning?
This one, I think he has to. He really does. I mean, yes, I know Callis will probably interfere. Somebody will interrupt. Maybe Sammy will turn on Jericho, but Ospreay has to win.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to go of where they have potentially set this up for Jericho, that he loses this big match to Will Ospreay. He's divested himself of his group, save for Sammy Guevara, which could be like the last threat. It's like by the end of this, it's like Jericho is almost like detached from everything. Mm-hmm. And like there's like what he's ended the friendship with Don Callis. He's completely divested of everything at that point. Like it almost feels like the end of a Jericho, or at least like
the end of this version of Jericho.
Perhaps he disappears for a bit, or I don't know, but I could certainly see, like, I think Ospreay should win this one. And it's a high bar. There's a lot of matches here that have high bars. CM Punk and Samoa Joe. Where do you think this one goes on the card? Early, middle, late in the show?
I'm going to say middle, late. Like maybe not necessarily even second last, but towards the latter portion of the show. Honestly, I think like this is essentially Collision's main event, I would say, unless like if there's even such a thing, but like it's the biggest program that they're trying to build on Collision so far. And for that reason, I see it getting like pretty late billing.
They need a big segment on this Collision. Like this is one where again, it's a broken record. If they had not done the previous match on TV, I think this one is a lot more anticipated than it is. I think this is one that could certainly deliver. I don't think people are not looking forward to this, but I think it's one that it's really going to have to work for its placement, because I could see this one going out and getting like 20, 22 minutes. And I don't know how this audience will respond to a long match between these two. If this is like late in the show on a 4+ hour main card.
I mean, it's CM Punk, and it's Samoa Joe, and like I see it. I don't see people like not giving this a reaction. Like people will react for this. How long they'll go? How long do you think the match will be?
Well, that's part of the question. I think this one should stay at around like 15, 16. I don't think they should be going like 25 minutes.
How long was their last one? Do you remember the one on TV?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
I think it certainly has to best that one. Like it has to, like at this point, I don't think any of us are looking for them to maybe have a matchup like a 60-minute, draw, like in their ROH
Which, if
days.
this was their first AEW match, people would have that expectation that they're
Yeah.
going to tease like the hour, which I think based on the fact that the TV match was so much shorter, you're not going into that with that expectation.
No, but I mean, I'm expecting to be better than what they showed us. This is one where, I mean, much like my feeling about FTR versus the Bucks, I feel that this even more so with this match, where I think there's so much story to tell between the legacy of their rivalry that they really didn't have it touched on yet. We saw a brief video sort of segment before their last match on TV, but God, there's so much more, and I almost wonder if like the road to might be really worth watching when it comes to this particular match.
They went 15.5 on their TV match. So that's the comparison. And then House of Black against the Acclaimed and Badass Billy Gunn. We went over our picks there. I see the title change here. I think that would be my call here. I think you're just going for the pop for the night, and I think it'd be one of the bigger ones. But you think House of Black should just keep the belts?
House of Black. Yes.
Okay. And then MJF and Adam Cole.
Yeah, tough one. I personally see Cole winning the championship.
Yeah, I think that seems to be where you're leading everything to go in that direction. I see them losing the 0 hour match. I don't see them winning the tag titles.
Yeah.
For this one, I guess I'm just looking at it from like, what are you coming back with the next week? Are you doing a rematch between these two? It seems like the idea of a title versus title with Punk, like I would have been dangling that one a lot.
That's
more.
not happening now.
I don't think that one could just come out of the blue on a week's notice.
Yeah.
And maybe you come back with the rematch between these two.
Man, for 1 week,
like no one is.
I mean, okay.
What's headlining? So Cole wins the title here. What's the match the next weekend?
Yeah. So yes, I would expect Cole or this championship to be defended at All Out. I got nothing, man, because like they're so invested in each other that it's hard for me to see them like face anybody but themselves, because nobody's been built. At the same time, the third match between these two and the match where a babyface MJF tries to come back and climb the mountain to beat Adam Cole, that's something you should spend like 4 months to build to, don't you think? They could just have another match and then maybe have another draw or like some sort of non-conclusive thing, and then you have 4 more months to build to a proper comeback. Or it could just be Punk's title that headlines, and we'll, I guess, find out who will challenge him as well.
Yeah. Do you see the main event of All Out being known when this show goes off the air, or do you see them waiting?
I feel like we should have a good idea, especially with
I hope so.
Punk. Like after the Joe match, like, okay, let's assume Punk beats Joe, especially now since he has the championship. Maybe gets attacked by, I don't know, Jay White or whoever,
Like seriously, if they both win, like I would just like, you could set up like Punk and Ospreay for the next week. I mean, you have to go big for something the next week. And I would not want to wait till Wednesday and have a 4-day build for that title match. I would want to have it pretty much set up, unless they have some like ace up their sleeve of something they're going to debut or shoot some big angle that none of us see coming. That is like, that would be the hope, is that you're coming out of this show and you are instantly driven to buy that show the next weekend, because there is some huge match that's coming out of this that maybe you don't see on paper here.
So let's play out another scenario where MJF wins and retains, whether as a babyface or whether as a heel. I'm more curious about what you see his All Out program being.
Well, I mean, for a lot of this lead up, I just assumed that we were going to be inching towards like the title versus title, but that does not feel like the.
Could they do that anyway and just maybe not give us a sort of like, an actual title change?
I don't like it on a week where it like neither side have acknowledged the other. It's not like you're even getting these lines from MJF about discrediting the fake champion on the other show or anything. He's never even brought up this title, and it just feels so out of left field.
That's going to be most of this card, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Like you have a week to do all this, and they can come back the next week, but I would hope that they've got some real great angle to go off the show with that is both satisfying as like the conclusion to this as the big show, while also leaving you wanting more for the next weekend. And the idea of spending another $50 the next week, it's like it's an uncharted territory for AEW, and I don't know how this audience is going to respond to both shows.
Or could these two win the tag team championships, the ROH tag titles, and defend those on All Out?
Yeah, there's certainly the idea that this has not peaked yet, that you could ultimately have these two where you think they're coming to blows, but then at the end of the show, they take out Roderick and the Kingdom and they come out of this, and there's the tension because one of them's winning this match, but they're still tag champions, but the feud is still brewing, and you know that the turn's coming, but you're going to wait for it. And quite frankly, I think that would be a very safe way to come out of this show, in that I would not want to separate these two yet. And you will get to the feud where you have a defined babyface and heel, but is now that time? It would seem the strongest argument is to give you that big advancement in the story on such a big show like this.
Agreed. Now that the more I talk about it, the more I feel like they could very well keep this thing going. And I don't know if, like, you know, audiences might complain that we didn't get a conclusive ending on what is supposed to be like the biggest show in history. But I think if the match is satisfying, these two
should have a phenomenal match, and
that's all that matters. I don't think people could be too disappointed for that reason.
You're giving people a finish. I would certainly argue you should do a finish in the match.
Of course. Yeah. If it's the main event.
You don't have to punctuate this with a turn. I mean, that is, you know, that's, I think, everyone's WrestleMania 17 lesson. It's like incredible show minus the angle at the end.
So what we're saying is anything can happen in this main event.
Well, I mean, part of it is, I think it's the blessing and the curse. I think they have opened up a lot of possibilities that should draw interest. At the same time, I don't think anyone sees really like a clear path that they're necessarily clamoring for. So you're leaving it to chance that hopefully whatever the direction is, it's a satisfying one, and people aren't just building up all these scenarios in their mind that they're creating a letdown for themselves after. But I have to say, overall, I feel they've created a big buzz for this show. I think that the pay-per-view number is going to be a very interesting one to look at. Because as much as some of the buildup has been maligned, I did think tonight's show, as busy as Dynamite was, the takeaway for me was this is the biggest show in this company's history, and they hit that very effectively.
Agreed. I thought this was, again, a very good go-home show. It's the type of tone that I wish they had taken for an entire month, you know, just to make this feel even that much bigger when you have that much more time to just convey that, hey, like, this really is the biggest show of all time, and that this is the reason why. Now that we have
draw, to me, I think that's the bigger draw than any one match on this show, is just the idea that this is historical, and for an audience that didn't live through a WrestleMania 3, like, that is what they're treating this as.
Yeah.
Even though you get stadium shows every year from WWE, it's like this mythical placement that a show of that magnitude has, and this is AEW's version of it that you want to be watching.
Yeah, WrestleMania already has that built in its name, you know, just through like years of history and proof. But All In doesn't necessarily, you know. But so they definitely could have done a whole lot more work, just kind of pushing what the legacy of this show is going to be after tonight. Beyond that, I think all the criticisms that this show, this card has been given, for the most part, because I'm not listening to every single person, especially like the bad faith arguers out there, but at least for me, like, I feel a lot of the criticism was warranted. But now that we've kind of like separated our dream cards from what the actual card is, I can appreciate it for what it is, and I'm almost looking forward to every single match on this show.
My last question for you, the all-time buy number for AEW, it's All Out 2021 with the first Punk match against Darby Allin, 205,000 buys. What do you see as the best case scenario for All In?
Because this is so unproven, with this being an afternoon show, I don't know.
That's a big factor.
I don't know how much like I have no idea, dude. Like, I don't think it'll beat that record. Because
I don't think so either.
Because the afternoon, I feel like we'll take such a big bite out of it. But I mean, AEW audiences follow, wherever this company goes. How much of that audience, is willing to maybe shift their timetable to watch a show in an afternoon? Probably a good chunk. So like, I'm expecting this to do better than what. Tell me like what some recent numbers were like for Forbidden Door.
That was over. It was over 140, around that range. Okay. Is what we're talking about for Forbidden Door.
I'm expecting maybe like better than that. I'm expecting like maybe in the 150 range, maybe even 160. Just kind of given the stature, but you're probably a way better estimate than I would be.
It's sometimes tough. You just don't know like what's going to hit in the end. Like I do sense like a lot of.
I think the buzz is there.
I do too. I certainly sense that, and I feel that's going to escalate in the coming days for sure. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there might be a higher ceiling than maybe I'm putting on it at this point, because I'm kind of in the same range as you.
And like, does that rate include like late buys? Are they doing delayed airings perhaps on pay-per-view? I guess I don't even know if that needs to happen these days with like VOD and all that.
Yeah,
like, I mean, how many people will buy this after it's live?
Well, I mean, AEW has had some success of like well-received shows that do like replay buys that through that word of mouth. And I think you could chalk this up as one of those shows that if you miss, like I'm not concerned about the quality of this show. I think that's going to come out, and you would have to have a lot of off nights for the show to not deliver. It's just how effective the promotion has been. And I think above any of one particular match, it's just the magnitude of what the show means for the company and the setting of it being such a historic stadium, and that's going to be full. So let's move on over. If you have any super chats,
just to remind people who might be tuning in, some of you guys, maybe even for the first time, we will be reviewing AEW All In live Sunday. What time did we say, John?
As soon as the show's over. So, I mean, it's up to AEW when we will be going live. So we will say in the vicinity of 5 to 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. But easiest way, subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications, and you will be aware of when we are going live on a Sunday, late afternoon, early evening. Mm-hmm. All right. And the same for next weekend, right after Payback and right after All Out.
And for every single show in eternity, we will be here right afterwards.
Everything. We're just going to chain ourselves to these computers for the rest of our lives. All right. Super chats are open, as is forum.postwrestling.com, where I asked people for feedback to Dynamite as well as memories of Terry Funk that we will get to.
We got a super chat here from Matt Hahn, who sends $5. Thank you for the support, Matt. He says, is there any update on Kyle O'Reilly? I've been wondering if he was going to play a part in this MJF and Cole feud.
Yeah, I mean, he's been out for about a year or so. He had the neck surgery. So, I mean, that's typically like a year or so. So I don't know what his latest status is, but certainly you would think like this program is a potential return for him that gets him right into a main event angle. Like he would fit in seamlessly with everything that's going on with Adam Cole.
Yeah. But even if he wasn't, like, as long as Cole is elevated, I think Kyle O'Reilly moves along with him, because he'll always be attached to Adam Cole, throughout their careers. And wherever Cole finds himself out at the end of this MJF program, probably, as world champion, you can insert Cole right in. So I don't even know if there's like a need to rush, if his rehab or comeback or anything. I certainly wouldn't expect him on Sunday.
All right, let's go to Saeed from Vancouver. Really missing Moxley singles matches. Match of the night for me, I guess, referring to Fenix. In my opinion, keeping the Ray Fenix visa issues until after tonight would have been more impactful. Ospreay and Jericho had a great promo off, which changed my mind on the match. Hell of a promo by Jericho, one of his best in a while. Rest in peace, Terry Funk.
We get Andrew from Cape Breton, who says, while this build has been lackluster, I thought that tonight was an excellent go-home show for All In. Ospreay and Jericho made the show feel important, as did the final scene with how pumped MJF and Cole were. They also did a great job with the Stadium Stampede match. I'm somewhat confused about AR Fox, though. Firstly, I'm not sure if Nick Wayne and Nick's mom are as forgiving as Darby Allin. Yeah, well,
he couldn't wait to just let bygones be bygones.
Yeah, he probably just said, I'm sorry. Okay, sometimes that's all it takes. Secondly, if they wanted to bring Christian in, I'm sure they could have made it a trios match and added Nick Wayne on Sting and Darby's side. I'm wondering if he wasn't able to go to the UK, because if it's not, it's a real shame Fox doesn't get that spotlight and is being replaced. Do you have any thoughts about that? The fact that they didn't decide to make it a trios match?
I mean, I don't know what the status is of like everybody in this match. Like
Right.
I would feel pretty confident that AR Fox, it's not just a strict booking decision that we want him off the match. Like it felt like it was extremely like this came out of completely out of left field. There were no hints towards this. So it felt as though they were just, their back was against the wall to make what to me was a very awkward shift and everything.
And again, like they do have a pay-per-view the week after, so maybe you can expect, presence from Fox and also Nick Wayne on that show.
Yeah. And quite frankly, like I'm not, if AR Fox, he was the one tied to this story. It's like, I'm not dying to have Brian Cage attached to this and just to have Nick Wayne in there as well. Like Nick Wayne's part of the story, but I don't know. I wasn't as perplexed over that. It was more so just it was a very confusing segment, and they probably had their reasons that they had to try and do the mental gymnastics here to get to this tag match. All right, next up is Scott from Atlanta, and says that the crowd was hot all night and more crowded than 1 year ago in the same building. So he was at the arena tonight in Duluth, Georgia. After Dynamite went off the air, MJF and Adam Cole led the crowd in a rendition of The Devil Came Down to Georgia. Tony Khan then came out and just left the stage, discussing this as the biggest week in AEW history and suggesting that Atlanta was key to the launch of AEW due to TNT and TBS being here, and hinted that Atlanta would get a pay-per-view soon. Good old Jim Ross is on his way to ringside. Time for a time warp to Saturday. Most of the crowd seems to be sticking around. Lots of curiosity and doubt that CM Punk is here, but also discussion that the Elite were done by 8:20 p.m. and might have headed out here after that. Thanks as always. So you have to have shifts for these double tapings. You have to clock in and clock out by a certain time, maybe.
We could speculate, can't we? Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I found out his partner, by the way. I don't need to say.
Just share. It's a collision tag.
Okay, spoiler warning. Fast forward 15 seconds. It's Hook.
Okay.
That's it. All right, Jordan from the Bronx.
What drama?
First things first, rest in peace to Terry Funk, a legendary career that often gets overlooked by fans. I wasn't old enough to appreciate his stuff in WCW, and I didn't have the access to watch his work in Japan. ECW was my first exposure to him, and I always appreciated how hard he worked there. AEW in general has too many things happening at once. Last week was Fight for the Fallen, which was a last-minute decision for a good cause. This week is Fyter Fest, in which most of the show was talking. I guess that is it. All In is Sunday. All Out is the following week. There may be some diminishing returns. I mean, those are just titles, right? I mean,
for a go-home show, like, yeah, it should be a promo heavy show, to be quite honest. Like that, I didn't have a big issue with that. He's
pointing out the sort of irony of a show called Fyter Fest being mostly talking. But they're just
was this any different than a Dynamite? Like I don't even look at these titles.
Exactly. Yeah. And like there's no way we could complain about Fight for the Fallen like being moved, for a charitable cause, right? So it's just I don't think you have to worry so much about that. He says my weekly swerve rant continues. I'm certain that AR Fox being replaced must be a travel related issue, but the way they did it was frustrating. The team was great for the last month, and one loss ends everything. Maybe they didn't want to do 2 injury angles on the same show, but there must have been a better solution that kept the team together. Christian must also be able to smell when a wrestler is fatherless. The look on his face when he realized that Nick Wayne was in the ring was priceless. Okay. All right. Cool.
We go to Muggin, a solid go-home show for Wembley. Some newsworthy happenings with the return of Santana and Ortiz. The tag team scene needs them. The MJF Cole cat and mouse is hitting its apex, and something has to give here. The dueling promos casted even more doubt over Friedman's sincerity being legit. Cole being defensive reeks of a red herring.
Very nice. Very nice.
Muggin / a movie trailer.
That's it.
Something's got to give. It's an apex in the cat and mouse affair.
Lastly, we got a Jesse from the 6 who says, rest in peace, Terry Funk. That Jericho Ospreay segment was weird. Is Pregazin really dead? You know this name?
No. Sorry.
Okay. And congrats to India for landing a spacecraft on the moon. But what I really want to know is, what does John think of the Austin Matthews extension?
I'm sorry. I'm out of the loop there. I know about the India spacecraft, but I don't know about the Austin Matthews the Austin. Oh, sorry. I thought you said the Austin Matthews extension. Oh, I guess he extended. Well, good for him. The core 4.
Yeah. Okay. And Yevgeny Pregazin is a Russian oligarch, mercenary leader, and former close confidant of Russian President Vladimir Putin. until he launched a rebellion in June 2023. And he's feared dead after a Russian plane crash.
Okay. On that
Thanks,
note,
Jesse.
that is going to wrap up a nearly 2-hour edition of Rewind-A-Dynamite. So we want to thank all of you for sticking around, listening to the show. A big thank you for WH Park jumping on with us to chat about Terry Funk. We will have more on him in the coming days. I'm going to embark on a story. No promise on when that will be posted, but I'm going to work on it. So that's coming. And Wai.
Hey, shout out to you, Brandon Thurston, and Nick Hausman for your edition of Pollock and Thurston this afternoon. This is available on the feed right now. What did you guys talk about?
We chatted all about All In, the build-up, a lot on the Tony Khan media call. So I avoided chatting about that with Wai tonight. But if you want to hear our thoughts on that call, as well as, the Cash Wheeler situation, pending changes to All In, and of course, the backstage drama that continues with AEW. Nick Hausman, always very insightful and chatting all about AEW and its issues as we are going into its biggest card of all time in terms of its attendance. So lots of great stuff chatting about that with Nick and going over a bunch of news stories with Brandon. And
also shout out to B Detroit and John Ceno. What up, though? Filling in for Braden and Davey while the two of them are in London for All In for 3 weeks here on Up Next. So we welcome them. They did a show this afternoon, so they'll be live on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. You can tune into that right now, also on the free feed. And shout out to Jordan Goodman and Neil Flanagan and myself for our edition of the Wellness Policy Open Topic. We heard from a lot of you guys. It was one of my favorite shows that we've done. We've heard some great responses to it so far. So you can find that in the Post Wrestling Cafe feed for free, postwrestlingcafe.com.
How did you book Austin and Colton on the Wellness Policy?
Excuse me?
I tuned in to the Wellness Policy and I saw you with the guns out.
Well, listen, man, the weather is pretty warm here in Toronto, and I guess
you lifting with Santana?
I'm a bit of a badass myself.
All right. Well, check out the Wellness Policy and watch the video version, okay, to see what I'm talking about. So there are lots of great shows.
Tank top, everybody. It's not a big deal.
Thursday, we've got Rewind-A-Wai. We're chatting about the Royal Rumble 2008.
Oh, yeah. We got that
squeeze
too.
That in at some point.
Right.
Ways off to start this show, and that's coming out Thursday for Café members, and then we're back. Rewind-A-SmackDown. Postmarks dropping Saturday.
We're going back in time on Friday. We're gonna re-air
goodness.
our review of AEW's first. Oh, sorry, not even AEW's. Just All In. Okay, the very first show from Chicago in 2018. We'll be putting that on the free feed. So if you guys want to go back and listen to our thoughts, well, you can.
That's my favorite show this week because we don't have to do anything for it. We just have to upload old stuff. We should get into the habit of that. So check out that on Friday. That'll be on the free feed. And then, of course, this weekend, Collision Course, Postmarks, and then Sunday, as soon as All In completes and the final words are Adam, flip off All In and join us here on the YouTube channel. Post Wrestling has you covered for everything this weekend. And that is it for us. Thank you for tuning in to Rewind-A-Dynamite.